This is my good friend, Aziz Memon from Pakistan. Recently, Aziz and I had breakfast, and over breakfast, he shared with me one of the most remarkable stories. He told me how he had been to visit the home of a young woman who had been assassinated giving polio immunizations. He went to console them. He went to comfort them. But what he found was another young woman, her sister. And she stood defiantly and she said, "My sister did not die in vain. I am going to continue her good work." You see, because in Aziz's country, it's open season on aid workers, and dozens and dozens and dozens have been murdered providing immunizations. That day, I believe that it galvanized his resolve, that he said, "I am going to ensure that this disease is eradicated." Now, flashback to 1950s in North America. Polio hysteria ran rampant. Pools and schools were closed, movie theaters went dark, parents kept their children under lock and key, and hospitals set up wards with these iron lungs. Iron lungs where paralyzed children would get into them, and there was a machine that would help to bring air in and out of their lungs to preserve their lives. Then, 2 million children took place in the first mass clinical trials of Jonas Salk's new vaccine. It would be a year before the results were known, but it was heralded a success. It worked. It was safe. And this was the first step in eradicating a disease. You know, there would be many more turns and twists in the scientific community before polio eradication was permanent. But if this disease were to be eradicated, it would be the second time in mankind that a disease had been wiped off the planet. The very first time being smallpox. But for Aziz in Pakistan, and for others in the 2 remaining endemic countries in our world of Afghanistan and Nigeria, polio remains a real, true threat. And ladies and gentlemen, it remains a true threat to children everywhere in the world until that last case is wiped off the planet. Because if there's one case, all it needs is a plane ride to travel here. If I were to ask everyone in this room, or if you were to ask others across North America, what is polio? You'd likely get one of 2 answers. You'd hear either A, that it's gone, or B, what is it? People have no idea what it is anymore. But this is recent history. 30 years ago, just 30 years ago, there were 350,000 cases per year in the world. We have made Herculean strides in the eradication of this disease. Last year, globally, 27 cases. This year, as of January 1 to today, we have had 4 cases. We are this close to wiping this disease off the face of the planet and keeping what we have said is our promise to the children of the world. So, flash forward now from the 1950s to 1985, where a Rotary Club in the Philippines decided that they thought that they could isolate the disease to their country and therefore wipe it out. This was a pretty big undertaking, and it's a really cool story. With the aid of a large grant, they truly proved what was thought to be impossible. They held massive immunization days. And you know what? They wiped out the disease. they absolutely wiped out the disease. No small task, absolutely no small task. So, Rotarians, you can put a lot, they're leaders, and you can put a lot of stuff in front of Rotarians, but they're going to solve it, including this dreaded disease. And so we joined together with many partners. We joined together with the Centers for Disease Control, the WHO, UNICEF, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And together, we have been able to immunize 2.5 billion children. It's a pretty staggering number. We are the next generation of polio pioneers, because you know what? The best immunization in the world doesn't work unless we get it to the children. I'd like you to meet Mamta. Mamta is in New Delhi, that's where she lives, and she's a seamstress. And every day, Mamta climbs 3 stories of stairs to get to her studio at the top. She drags herself up by her arms. This photograph was taken by award-winning photographer Alice Henson, and I asked Alice the question that likely many of you in the room are thinking yourselves. Why wouldn't she have put her studio on the first floor? So Mamta said to her, first, climbing these stairs every day is a victory for me. But when I get to the second floor, there's light. And I can open up the shutters and fresh air comes in, and I am not letting polio rob me of my spirit. She chooses to live. I visited India not too long ago, and India was actually thought to be the country that would be probably the last to be taken off the endemic list because of the size, the scope, the infrastructure. It would be a very large task to be able to accomplish this. So, while I was there, visiting a number of different cities, one thing I saw from city to city that was the same. You would see people that were called crawlers. And just like Mamta, but they would be on the street and they'd be pulling themselves along with their hands. They were wearing flip-flops on their hands. And so they would be going from place to place. And it was absolutely unbelievable to watch. Now, let me tell you, a couple of days later, we went to Chennai, and we were there handing out wheelchairs to polio survivors. They had taken it upon themselves to come up with a game plan to try and mobilize some of these crawlers. And so we handed out wheelchairs, and quite frankly, this was much more than a mobility device. This was a device that was providing opportunity and hope, and for many of these people, obviously, dignity. That was a big gift. So how did we wipe it out of India? Well, this is incredible. If you can get your mind around these numbers, we immunized 172 million children in 12 hours with 4 million volunteers. This happened repeatedly in India to eradicate that disease. Now, if you think that's mind-boggling, let me tell you about what happened in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, there were 2 warring tribes, and they were asked if they could lay their arms down for one day so that their children could be immunized. This is Ravi Ravindran. He is a Rotarian in Sri Lanka and a leader in that country. He was responsible for helping to broker this ceasefire between the militant leaders. And this was a very difficult and obviously a very treacherous task. And he met with one of the warlords and he said to him, "The war is not with our children. We want our children to be immunized." And so Sri Lanka is now polio-free. Somewhere along the way, we began to realize that this was much bigger than simply the eradication of polio. What we were able to do was to put into place a public health infrastructure that tackles all kinds of diseases. And this, ladies and gentlemen, will be the larger legacy out of this entire project. Because of the lessons learned from polio, we can now look at things like diphtheria and tetanus and whooping cough and so much more. And in recent history, one of the most incredible things to happen, because of this public health infrastructure, we were able to shut down Ebola in its tracks. That, again, is mind-boggling. This year, for the first time ever, we have gone weeks without a case of polio being brought forward. Today, we stand poised to rid transmission of this disease, not sometime in the distant future, but now, and hopefully within this year. And we will be able to keep this promise that we have made to the children of the world. Ramesh Ferris knows this promise all too well. Ramesh is a polio survivor. He was adopted by a Canadian family from his Indian family when he was a small child because he had been born with polio. He went back to visit his country a couple of years ago and was reunited with his birth mom. And it was a wonderful opportunity for him to hear the story and to hear her story because she said to him, "I love you. I gave you up for adoption because I knew that that would provide you with other opportunities for education and for better health care." What a difficult thing for a mom to do, and what a thing of love. Ramesh is a polio warrior. He actually has ridden from coast to coast in North America in a hand cycle, raising money and awareness for polio eradication. He is an advocate of advocacy. He meets with heads of state, with presidents, prime ministers, with the Queen, with the Dalai Lama, all ensuring that this message is kept top of mind, that governments understand that we can't take our foot off the gas until the last case is wiped out. Because quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, the money that we save once this disease is eradicated can be put back into other public health issues, things like cancer or HIV or malaria. We're going to do it. We're absolutely going to do it, and we will. Now, one last story. When I was a little girl, I used to watch as my grandmother would limp across the living room, getting from A to B. I would watch as she labored across the backyard or perhaps up the sidewalk to our home for a visit. I was a little girl. I had no idea what was going on. I just knew that Grandma limped. She was 9 years old when she contracted her polio. And like all other children who were faced with that reality, she was kept under lock and key. She used to walk every day to school with her best friend, and they no longer could see each other. And so they were able to pass notes back and forth to each other. That was their only way of being able to stay connected. This is a photo of my grandmother with her grandchildren. Polio didn't win.
We are this close.
We are this close.
Tutirek Modes.
We are this close.
This close to making history.
This close.
We're this close.
We are this close.
We are this close.
This close.
This close to changing the world.
We are this close to making sure no child suffers a crippling disease
ever again.
We are this close to making history.
We are this close to ending polio.
This close to ending polio.
We're this close.
This close.
This close to ending polio.
This close.
We are this close to ending polio.
All we need is you.
All we need is you.
All we need is you. It's you.
All we need is you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are this close to eradicating this dreaded disease. The finish line is in sight, and we are all going to do it together, and we are going to keep this promise to the children of the world. Thank you for your kind attention.